Hello and welcome to Global Topics. I'm Dr. Mike Krasanik, the Executive Director of the Minnick Center for International Engagement at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts. Today we present the first in a five-part series on the key foreign policy issues facing the United States, seeing those issues through the lens of the presidential campaign. The first issue is Syria. There is no more heart-wrenching photos on television or on the internet today than those that come out of Syria. Whole families killed, children massacred, evidence of extreme torture, entire neighborhoods decimated, all committed by the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, as he uses extreme and unrelenting force to quell the nationwide war against his regime. While this killing is going on and the civil war spreads, the world sits and watches from afar, and leaders of the free world make strong statements and promises that the Assad regime will eventually fall. President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton have both talked tough and urged Assad to leave power. Both have stated publicly that the days of the Assad regime are numbered. But most experts in the region believe that these threats are viewed by Assad as weak and pose no threat to his regime. Only the French leader, François Hollande, has talked about the need for military intervention, but his views have had little support. Many in the West are hoping that neighboring Turkey takes military action, but the Turkish leaders are waiting for the U.S. to take the lead. The Syrian crisis has entered the foreign policy debate here in the United States, as President Obama has been criticized by some Republicans, Senator John McCain of Arizona in particular, for not taking a more aggressive stance to support the rebels in Syria. McCain believes that the Obama administration has failed to intervene in a matter like it did in Libya, with tactics such as a no-fly zone over major urban areas, the formation of a safe zone for refugees and for the rebels near the Turkish border, and the transfer of heavy weaponry to the rebels so that they can counteract the aerial bombardments of the Syrian Air Force. At the very least, McCain would like to see the commitment of some U.S. Special Forces on the ground to serve as trainers. The Obama administration is not interested in taking such interventionist steps, as it has taken credit for ending the U.S. presence in Iraq and has promised to get out of Afghanistan in 2014. The president reads the polls, and it is clear that the American public is not interested in getting involved in another war situation in the Middle East. Also, Syria is currently supported militarily by Russia and Iran, and some form of Western U.S. intervention would certainly complicate international relationships and heighten tensions even further in the region. Quite simply, President Obama and the American people are focused on domestic matters and have little interest in a civil war in Syria. The only hint of a military response from the Obama administration is a statement by the White House that the U.S. will not tolerate the use of chemical or biological weapons by the Assad regime. There are, however, all those images of dying Syrians, many children, and the memory of how powerful nations stood by and allowed thousands and thousands of innocent people to die in Cambodia, Bosnia, and Rwanda, because there was little interest in using military force to save lives. The debate over human rights versus non-intervention is one that often brings heated exchanges from those who don't want a nation to stand by while innocents are being killed, and those who make decisions based on national self-interest and practicality. In Syria, it is clear that the proponents of national self-interest and practicality have won the day, as the president and most Republicans do not want the United States to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan only to become involved in Syria. It must be mentioned that the United States and the international community have taken some steps to weaken the Assad regime, such as tough economic sanctions, freezing the assets of Syrian officials, and making a whole range of financial transactions difficult for the regime. There is no question that these actions have limited the ability of the regime to operate and created serious economic dislocations in the country. The Assad regime is weakening by the day, and defections of key personnel continue. But it is important to emphasize that the Assad regime has held firm and is willing to use whatever level of violence in order to stay in power. Assad and his advisors are of the opinion that if they use overwhelming force, they will eventually weaken the rebels and force them to give up the fight. What is more likely to happen is some sort of stalemate between the regime and the rebels of Syria, as Syria disintegrates as a country. Assad may be able to stay in power, but he will be constantly fighting a rearguard action against the rebels. No one wins, no one loses, but the killing goes on, while the West stays out of the fray, hoping that the rebels can eventually carry the day and force Assad from power. This is Dr. Mike Krasanik from the Minnick Institute for International Engagement saying thanks for watching Global Topics.